Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about Ohio's Certified Local Governments Program. Today with us we have two presenters. First that's going to be speaking is Nathan Bevel, and Nathan is the Certified Local Governments and Preservation Services Manager at the Ohio Historic Preservation Office. And also secondly presenting today is Catherine Fortner, and she is the Grants Manager at the Ohio Historic Preservation Office, and thank you both for attending today. Before I turn it over to both of them, we'll just go over a couple quick housekeeping items today. First off, if you experience any troubles today in the webinar program, so if the sound breaks up or the slides seem like they're not moving in the way that you think they should be, best solution, just close the webinar program down, click the link that was sent to you again, and that should solve 99% of your problems. And the same thing goes if you're on the telephone. Just call back in to that number that was provided to you, enter all your PIN information, and that should solve most of your problems. Second, today we're going to be answering questions at the end of today's program. So please send your questions in whenever you have them. You can type them into the chat box on your little tool. But we'll be answering those questions at the end. But by all means, send those questions when you have them to us, and we'll get them answered for you. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nathan Bevel with the Ohio Historic Preservation Office. First and foremost, the question you probably all are asking yourselves is, what is the Certified Local Government Program? There we go. Primarily, this is a federal, state, and local partnership. It was created in the 1980s because local governments wanted to have more say in the National Register of Historic Places nomination process. So they created this program, and it essentially emphasizes the local responsibility, the local government's role in protecting historic resources. And so a large part of the program is highlighting the importance of the local review in the National Register process, but also the local protection that comes from that review and that process. So, how do you get certified? First and foremost, the goal is to create an effective local historic preservation ordinance. There are both federal and state requirements, including qualified commission, a system for survey, public participation, local designation ability, and any other state requirements. Most of the state checklist actually covers those. So your goal is you submit something to us, the ordinance, you revise it if you need to, especially if you already have an ordinance put in, review everything, we will work with you, we talk with you, we will work with you through the entire process and get your ordinance all up to snuff before you even submit it to council. You get everything passed, submit everything to us at OHPO, and then we submit everything to the National Park Service. Then when that is done, then you get a nice certificate, and you get a letter from the Park Service, and that opens you up to all of the different benefits of the program. This is the current list of who all is certified in Ohio. We have 56 CLGs. They range in size from Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati down to Mount Pleasant, which has a population just over 500 people. So long as you have a historic preservation ordinance that meets the requirements, you are eligible for this program. So what does this program actually mean for you? First and foremost, you have to have a strong local historic preservation program. You have a program that effectively protects historic resources, that reaches out to people, that really promotes historic preservation as a solution and as a benefit to your community. You get review authority for local National Register nominations, whether districts, sites, or any other properties that are on the National Register. You have authority to review those before they go to the state level final approval. You are eligible for training, technical assistance, and additional benefits. You may have heard of our Building Doctor program. You get a discount in that program for presenting those. You get discounts in other training sessions that we have. And also you get a lot easier access to us. If you're having a preservation issue, we have a lot more information about your community on hand, especially your ordinance, and that really opens you up to getting additional resources from us. And then finally, the big thing and the thing everyone's here for is it opens you up to eligibility for the Certified Local Government Grants. And for more information on that, I hand you over to Kathy.
Thank you, Nathan. This is Kathy, and we'll talk more about the grant program now. So the CLG grant program is an integral part of the Historic Preservation Fund grant that funds the OHPO. And it's the most direct way that we provide benefit to the communities in that you get actual money. It is a competitive grant in that we usually have more eligible requests than we have money to give away, so the applications are reviewed and scored, and selections are approved by the Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board. It is a matching grant, so the grant award covers 60% of the total project costs, and the community has to come up with a 40% match, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the match amounts can be and come from. And it is a reimbursement grant, which means that you don't get money until the project is completed. So while overall you will get 60% of the total project costs from the grant, the fact that you don't get it till the end of the project may require some cash flow planning, depending on how your project is set up. Who is eligible for these grants? Well, as the title would indicate, it's the certified local government. So those 56 communities that Nathan showed in his slide are eligible to apply for these grants. But it's also true that third parties can administer these grants. So with the approval of the CLG, other organizations within those communities can manage, apply for and manage grants. We do require that these organizations, because we have to do our due diligence on financial management, those organizations have to be able to supply us with an independent kind of financial audit, either an actual audit report or a compilation statement. So that does require that these be pretty well organized groups that can be third-party administrators. So these would be other units of government other than the unit that the CLG coordinator actually resides in. It could be your local historical society. It could be a group founded around a specific preservation project in your community. All of those organizations would be considered appropriate third-party administrators. There is a not very frequently used sort of hybrid arrangement where if the third party doesn't have the organizational history or structure to meet our financial reporting requirements, where the CLG can act as the fiscal agent, but the third party would actually manage the project work. And as I said, that's a pretty rare occurrence. In addition to the eligibility of the entity applying for the grant, there are certain things that are eligible projects that can be funded with these grants. And we think about them in these 7 broad categories. And we'll talk a little bit about each specific category. So planning projects have to do with work around actually keeping your ordinance relevant and up to date and useful for you. That's a pretty common kind of project we do. I don't know, anything you want to add to that, Nathan? Survey projects under the theory that you can't manage what you can't measure. We certainly think that these kinds of projects are appropriate to actually quantify and qualify the historic resources in your community. Registration projects that involve putting together the nominations for either local or National Register listings. So these can be used for both your local designation of historic properties as well as the National Register listing. Pre-development projects cover a host of kind of things that would lead up to actual construction or development work on a property. So things like feasibility studies that could include market research and business plan development for a specific property, assessment reports, down to the actual specifications and drawings that you're going to use when you do get into the development phase. Now, development in our world means construction, so actual physical development of a property. There are some restrictions here in that we will only fund development projects for National Registered listed properties. So this means either a property that is individually listed or is within a National Register listed district. But within that, then it can cover any kind, or almost any kind of bricks and mortar construction, restoration, rehabilitation work. Acquisition is actually a fairly rare occurrence, although it is an eligible activity, but it again only applies to National Register listed properties that are threatened. And one of the reasons that this is not as frequently used is that because of the timing of the grant cycle, if the property is really in a sort of emergency threatened position, we're just not going to be able to respond quickly enough. And the dollar volume of our grants really ranges from a $5,000 minimum to about a $30,000 maximum. We generally have about $100,000 a year to award in these grants. So again, that's not going to go a long way to actually acquiring property. And then we have the public education and other, and of course being the other category, this can cover a lot of different things. One of the big things is different kinds of training opportunities. So these can be workshops either for your review board or commission or for the general public. We funded a lot of workshops on window repair, masonry, maintenance and repair, those kinds of things. Also just training for the board, review board and commissions. It can be used for conference attendance for commissioners and review board members. It also can fund educational materials. So we've had several projects where people were preparing handbooks or design guidelines for the owners of historic properties. Then the third thing, sort of broad category, is heritage tourism, and you'll see there's an example of a walking tour. We funded several kind of walking tour, either brochures or mobile app kinds of things built around the historic resources in the community. And of course, this is a government-run program. There are very specific things that we cannot fund with the grant program. And the first applies to any kind of federal fund, and that's lobbying. Even if you're lobbying for historic preservation, you can't use this grant money to do that. You can't use it to mitigate any impact on historic resources that have come through from any other kind of review, like a Section 106 review. Again, you can't use it for fundraising, even if you're fundraising for historic preservation. And we cannot do development or construction projects on properties owned by religious organizations. So we can't do bricks and mortar work on a church if it still is being used by the church organization. We can do things pre-development. You can do feasibility studies on the reuse of a church that the religious organization is planning to no longer use. And once the property is divested by the religious organization, then it can be used. So it's not that you can't do work on churches, but we can't do them while they're owned by the religious organization. And the last thing is curation and museum interpretation. And there are the lines seem kind of funny because, you might see a walking tour brochure as a museum interpretation, or the preservation of the building that the local history museum is in. So we would fund work to preserve that building, but not work that would be directly related to the museum function within the building. To give you a quick view of the application process, it's an annual process, generally speaking. All of the grant application information is available on our website. All work done for any project has to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. There are also links on our website to those. We encourage that when you're developing a grant application that you involve us in the drafts of that and discussing it. We're happy to do that. Our goal is to get as many good applications in and make sure that all our money goes back to the communities. This year we've had to move our deadline up a month or so, so that the deadline for this round of grants is February 1st, rapidly approaching. The grant awards will be announced on March 15th at the OSHPAB meeting, and the projects that are awarded on March 15th have a project period of April 1st to September 30th, 2014, so you get about 18 months to complete the project. One of the things that is evaluated when we're evaluating the grant applications is how well they fit into the state funding priorities. So these are developed every year. They don't change a whole lot, but there's usually one or two new emphasis added. And I'm not going to read those to you. They're available in all the information that's available online. But you do get extra points if your application project fits into one of these priorities. That 40% match that has to be provided by the community for the of the overall project costs can come from several sources. It does not have to be a cash outlay of 40%. If there is labor or in-kind services that you can have volunteered, that the value of those can go towards your match. And I can talk to people who have specific questions about what rates to use and how you determine that. No federal funds, no other federal grants can be used to make up the match, with the exception of the community development block grants. But other grants, other than federal grants, can be used to make up your match percentage. And overall, when developing your grant application, these are, some tips. One is look for partners in the community. The CLG grant application does not have to be developed only by the CLG staff, nor does the project have to be administered. Other partners in the community can do that. We encourage you to send us drafts and talk to us about your project so that you can put together the best application possible. At the end of the application, there is a checklist that will tell you for each one of those 7 categories of projects what you should make sure is included in your application. And at the end of the application instructions, there's listed the grant selection criteria, which is the scoring methodology that the Grant Selection Committee uses. And so I certainly encourage you to look over that so you can gear your application to those selection criteria. One of the things that is frequently left out is the context of the issue. Often people are so immersed in the problem or the issue that they need the grant to help them with that they forget that the rest of us aren't as deeply into it as they are. And so we really need a broad step back look at why is this a problem that you're trying to address, and why is it important to do it now, and how is the project that you're proposing here going to solve that particular problem for you. We're also looking for a reasonable budget, not a perfect budget, but a budget that's reasonable, that shows that you've gone through and thought about how the project is going to work, and where there might be contingencies and things like that. It really, besides defining the financial parameters, really is a good indication that you've thought through the project. And then again, look at those statewide funding priorities, because that is part of the selection criteria. And now Devin will tell you how to submit your questions.
Thank you, Kathy and Nathan. Yes, if you would like to start submitting your questions, please do so. You can do that in the chat box. And also, I just want to go over a couple quick announcements while you guys are entering any questions you have. First off, today's webinar was made possible in part through an AmeriCorps grant funding through Serve Ohio, Ohio's Commission on Service and Volunteerism, and the Corporation for National and Community Service. First, I'm going to talk about our new webinar structure. As some of you got an email from me know that we're changing our webinar structure. It's now becoming a membership benefit of Heritage Ohio. So webinars that are the normal monthly schedule of first Wednesday webinars are now going to be members only. So to learn more about becoming a member of Heritage Ohio, you can visit our website, which is www.heritageohio.org, and there's many affordable options both for individuals and organizations, very affordable for everyone. And also about the webinars, we're expanding our structure as well. First off, we're going to be offering some modulated multi-session webinars. And those will be available both to the public and members as well for an additional fee. Those, to give you an example, of something like the Main Street 101 sessions, each point of the Main Street program would be a 1-hour session spread across 4 sessions. And finally, webinars like these today, where we're presenting facts and information about services provided by both nonprofits and governmental agencies in Ohio, will remain free, and so just check your emails to see which ones are for a fee, which ones are for membership, and which ones are going to continue to be free. Second of all, we have a couple upcoming events coming up. First off, tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. in Canton, Ohio at the Canton Club, Heritage Ohio is having their very first fundraiser of the year. This fundraiser is going to be a special one that's very unique for us. It involves having 2006 Heisman Trophy winner Troy Smith and his Heisman Trophy come pay us a visit at the Canton Club, and also we'll be having some hors d'oeuvres, and there'll be a wine bottle roulette, and you can find more information about that on any of our social media pages, so Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Second of all, we have our next training coming up on March 12th in Paynesville, and that is going to be covering diversity in your downtown. So business diversity, ethnic diversity, some good topics there. So without further ado, I'll open up the question panel and we'll see what we got. All right, scroll to the top. Okay, first question is from Deborah. Can you elaborate on what types of private organizations may be eligible to serve as third-party administrators?
Sure, and there is no profit or nonprofit requirement there. For-profit companies would be eligible as well as nonprofit, and it really is, from our perspective, they'd have to be able to show that they have the wherewithal to manage whatever project they're proposing, and have the financial reporting that we require, and be approved by the CLG. So while the CLG doesn't have to be involved in the management of the project, they do have to approve and sign off on the application.
Thank you, Kathy. Taking a quick look through the questions, I'll answer a few myself here. Will these slides be available? Yes, they will be. They're currently on our website. So if you go up to the top under programs and trainings, or workshops and trainings, I mean, click on that, click on webinars, and up on the upper right corner of that page will be webinar archives, past webinars. Click that and those will all be there. Also, that link is available in your chat box. I send it to everyone at the beginning of the presentation. And will there be a current link to the application? I think I can send that out to everyone when I send out the reminder of when the recording is going to be posted. So I'll take care of that at the same time as well. Okay, second question is from Scott. How much is available annually? What is the maximum award, and what is the average amount awarded?
Yeah, so Generally, the CLG grant program is required to be 10% of our total historic preservation fund amount, and that's usually around $100,000 a year for the grant program. Over the last 5 years or so, I think the average award has been about $15,000, with the top being about 30. I think 31 was the highest.
Thanks, Kathy. Next question is, what is the maximum and minimum grant amounts that one can apply for? So is there a minimum?
Yes, there is a minimum grant award of $5,000, which means that using the 60-40 split, your total project would be about 5,300.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, 8,300.
8,300, okay. We have a couple county questions here. First off, Janice is asking, are counties eligible to be CLG communities?
Yes, counties in Ohio are technically eligible due to the home rule structure, the fact that counties and townships have some limitations on their government structure. There are some things that have to be worked out. We presently have only one township, which is kind of in the same boat. One township, Brookfield, that has a resolution passed that makes them a CLG. Yes, we can, but there are some things to work out. That's definitely something to really, my contact information is on there. Contact us and we can really kind of work on that and get some of those details worked out.
Thank you, Nathan. Next question is, how can someone access the OHI for what may already be done in our community?
Actually, if you are a CLG, you do get access, free copies of OHI forms and OAI forms. Also, one of the benefits is if you are a member or if you are one of these CLGs, you also get 2 people in your city or village or township, county, are eligible to have access to our online mapping system, which will actually tell you what OHIs you have in your municipality. It'll plot them out, and you can email us. We have a lot of them already digitized, if not all of them, but we just, due to access issues, we don't necessarily have them all listed online. But you can contact us, and if you are a CLG, then you do get access to all of those.
Next question is from Evelyn, and she would like to know if you have any sample historic preservation ordinances on your website, or if you could refer them to any.
We do have some sample language on our website. You can actually just go to www.ohpo.org. If you contact me, depending upon where you are, we can actually pull some other CLG ordinances of your city or village that is of similar size to give you an idea. Though that being said, we don't necessarily recommend an ordinance because the circumstances locally may be a lot more different or a lot very different than what another community has. There may be certain provisions that may need to be different. But we can provide you some samples, and we'll work with you to create something that works for your community.
Thank you, Nathan. First, we have a couple questions on just the program specifics, the application projects, and so forth. And secondly, there's some development questions. So we'll do the application-based ones first. First off, how long does it take to get a CLG approval for either the application or the projects, I guess, for the grants?
For CLG certification, generally I say 3 to 6 months. Our record was 2 weeks, and if you try to do that, I won't like you as much because going too fast, it just makes it really difficult. It depends on how long it takes for an ordinance to be drafted, if you already have one, or if you're going from scratch, how long your council takes to pass an ordinance, and then also technically at OHPO we get 30 days of review, and then the Park Service gets 30 days of review. So generally speaking, depending upon the speed of your local government, I say 3 months is the bare minimum. Usually can sometimes take as upwards of 6 months.
Yeah, For the grant applications, we're on a very fixed schedule of the applications are due on February 1st, and 6 weeks later, which is March 15th, is when the awards are announced.
Thank you, both of you. Also, there's a question kind of regarding the same thing. Will an application deadline for next year be February 1st? Do you guys even have an application deadline set for next year?
We don't, although I think it probably will be the same next year. We have to tie that to the schedule for the Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board meetings, since they're the ones that approve the award recommendations of the Grant Selection Committee. And as they also, their other function is to approve National Register nominations being sent to the National Park Service. And since those have increased over the last year or so, they've increased their meeting frequency. But I think they will be on the same schedule next year as they are on this year.
Thank you both. Here's a couple of technical questions, I guess is the best way to describe these. Diane's question is, the property for which we would apply for a grant is listed as a local landmark but is not listed on the National Register. Could we apply for grant money to get it registered? This would be one of the 7 categories, correct?
Absolutely. However, that may be problematic for this year, because when you're submitting a grant for a National Register nomination project, there is a pre-application questionnaire that has to be submitted, and this year the deadline for that is this Friday, like 2 days from now. And the purpose of that is to make sure that you're not going to spend your time working on a nomination that really has no chance of being approved. So it's a fairly short questionnaire that our National Registration group reviews and says, yes, this is a likely candidate for National Register listing, and then you go ahead and submit that with your application. So National Register projects are definitely an eligible activity, but you do need to get your questionnaire in ahead of time.
And the next technical question is, I'm just going to read it all. German Village within the CLG of Columbus was recently recognized by the American Planning Association as a great neighborhood. I'm wondering if we could apply for CLG funding to host a continuing education program for APA planners. Not quite open to the public, not quite for German Village commissioners, but surely there would be some collaboration among all parties. Does this sound like something that would be a fit?
It does, but I think we would have to think through the value to the local community and see where that is, but I think that would be based on who the attendees are going to be. So
do you think they should just submit a grant application and?
No, I think you should call me this afternoon.
So call them this afternoon. Next question is, without getting into too many specifics, can you give a few examples of projects that were not funded and why?
Well, there's sort of 2 categories. One is that the application was just incomplete. And again, I refer you to the checklist at the end of the application form. Given the process we need to go through, we have to hold everybody to the same standards. So no matter how good the project is, if the application isn't filled out appropriately, we can't consider it. And again, if you give us a chance to review it ahead of time, we can point out those problems. And then the second category would be things that really turn out to be ineligible activities. So things like the sort of museum or curation kind of projects. We've had people submit those. That's really not an appropriate CLG grant activity. We've had some things for landscape. Landscaping on the site of historic buildings. Unless that was really part of the historic character of the building and part of the National Register listing nomination, that's not something we get involved in. So it's that kind of thing where it really wasn't an eligible project. And again, if you involve us ahead of time, we can work that out with you.
Okay, now there's a couple more technical questions about the general process. First off, if your grant application average is $15,000, would that mean you're only giving 6 to 7 out per year?
No, I'm sorry. I meant those figures to mean the grant award. So that was a $15,000 grant award.
So on average, how many are you giving out per year?
Between 7 and 10.
Thanks. The next question is, can a CLG, or can you apply for a CLG grant while an application is in process?
You mean while your certification isn't? No.
Yes.
The problem with that instance is you don't know whether review from us, review from the Park Service is going to be completed by that deadline. 9 times out of 10, the Park Service is done within that 60-day review. However, we had one that actually, due to problems at the Park Service and problems with mail and everything, they actually took a couple of months to get everything processed. So therefore, it's difficult to sit there and have, we wouldn't want you to go through all of the steps and all of the hoops to get the grant application prepared if there is a chance that the Park Service wouldn't, or for whatever reason, we wouldn't get something through.
Thank you. Switching gears for the moment to some development grant questions. Would a development grant cover the cost to relocate overhead power lines from a historic memorial?
That's an interesting question. I think it might come down to whether those power lines were really threatening the preservation of the building. But again, that would be a good one to talk through.
Thanks, Kathy. The next one is, does the proposal have to be for a total restoration project, or can it provide a portion of a larger restoration project?
Oh, absolutely. It can be a phase of your restoration. Given those dollar values that I gave you, obviously that's not going to cover the total restoration of any but the smallest kind of property.
All right, switching gears back to some application questions. Is it common for CLG grant recipients to get approval for in-kind volunteer labor from commission members?
Sure. We're doing a project now where the commission is putting together sort of a design guidelines HP handbook for residents, and much of the work is being done by commission members, so they can be counted as volunteer labor.
Thank you. Next question is from Roseanne. Can you apply for more than one grant, and if so, do they each have to meet the minimum thresholds, or can they meet them in total?
The minimum threshold is really per project. So if I'm assuming we're talking about 2 separate projects. I think they would have to be submitted as separate applications. And there's no a CLG can submit more than one grant application in a grant cycle. But they would be considered, in effect, you're sort of competing with yourself.
Thank you, Kathy. Next question is from Caroline. How early can one begin working on the grant process with you in future years?
As soon as you start thinking about it.
Sounds good. Next question is from Evelyn. If a community applies for CLG status, does it cover the entire city or just a specified district or multiple districts within the city?
The CLG program, the CLG ordinance, is for the entire city. The actual ordinance, what you would be creating to become a CLG, is not the designation. This is just essentially what you're creating is what's called an enabling ordinance, which says that you as a city, village, township, or county can do this. You can designate properties. You can review those properties under historic preservation ordinance for changes to those properties. So you are creating something that's preparing you to go forward with that process. If you already have an ordinance passed and you have something already designated, you can bring it forward. But if you have a district that you're ready to go, what you actually have to do is pass your enabling ordinance, and then you go through the process outlined in your ordinance to actually designate that entire that district or that property. So technically, yes, in effect, the ordinance impacts the whole city, but no, it is not designating the entire city. It is designating only what you as a then commission would designate under the ordinance.
this is Kathy again, and I just wanted to make another comment along the question to do with the minimum amount of a project and multiple projects. We've had a couple communities come to us with situations where they have several properties in a historic district that, or a downtown area that have some development needs, but they're all fair, they're all under the minimum or about the minimum and can't be grant applications on their own. And we've been trying to work through a way where we can award some kind of sort of bundle grant where the CLG would be responsible for the grant, and the different projects where that money would go out would be identified in the grant, but it would go to more than one development project. So if you think that fits the kind of circumstance you're thinking about, call us and we'll talk through that and see if we can come up with a way to come up with that sort of bundled grant application.
Thank you, Kathy. If you have any more questions, please send them in now. We're beginning to wrap up on questions, so if you have any final questions, send them in now. Diane has a question, and Diane, correct me if I misstate this. So Diane is asking, do you have a suggestion for an amount for a grant to get a property on the National Register? So if if you have any suggestions of cost.
Yeah, and I'll, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to act as though nobody knows what that process is like and say that when you think about that process, the research and writing that needs to be done is, you can think of that as a doctoral dissertation level kind of piece of research. So it's something where you're probably going to hire a consultant to do that for you. So we have a consultant list, and we can help you come up with a list of people you could ask what they would charge you for that. But it varies greatly depending on the property. How big a certainly a single property is going to be easier than a district, and depending on how much information is readily available versus really has to be dug up, it can vary quite a bit. But it's generally done by a consultant, and we can help you identify the appropriate kinds of consultants to work with.
Thank you, Kathy. Ian has a question. Would a historic signage program potentially satisfy the CLG grant criteria?
Sorry.
A historic signage program.
Yeah, signage is one of these areas that, the area between heritage tourism and museum curation kinds of things. We do not consider signage an eligible project. And even though the information on the signs might be the same as the information you would put in your walking tour brochure, the signage needs maintenance. It's not like once you put those signs in place, you're done. One of the requirements of the CLG grant project is that it has to end on that end date, and it has to be over. There can't be ongoing maintenance required. When we spend money on a development grant for a building, we cover that, that ongoing maintenance issue with a preservation agreement or a covenant that makes the owner commit to the continued maintenance. That doesn't make sense with signs. So signage is not an allowable project.
Thank you, Kathy. If anyone has any final questions, I'll give you a moment to send them in. While we're waiting to see if any final questions come in, I'd just like again to thank both Nathan and Kathy for agreeing to do this today. It was a wonderful webinar. And we do hope that many of you consider becoming CLG programs. It's definitely a great way to get some new grant access for your community, and they definitely are great communities to visit as well. So final questions. Okay. Referring back to the signage question, would a walking tour brochure be allowable, to confirm what it was just said?
Yes, we funded many walking tour brochure projects.
Thank you, Kathy. One question from Bill. For a restoration grant proposal, do I need an actual contractor quote, or can I have the architectural estimate of cost of the restoration?
It's better if you get the quotes, because we're going to make the grant award off the budget that you put in your grant application, and so the more comfortable you can be that that's your final cost, the better it will be. If your final costs turn out to be more than you expected when you submitted the grant application, the grant award amount is not going to change. So you're going to have to come up with the money on your own.
Thank you, Kathy. We have a question about the program itself and one of its functions. Is the CLG listserv up and running?
Yes, the listserv is up and running. I'm working on some content to start sending out. Honestly, I don't know if anyone's actually used it yet, but it is there. You can email me for the information about posting to it, but it is there if you have questions to go to the other CLGs that have signed up, and hopefully we can kind of get that up and running and move that a bit more forward, yes.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're going to wrap it up. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact Kathy or Nathan, and if you need to send questions here, you can do that as well. That's info@heritageohio.org. Thank you all for attending today, and thank you, Nathan and Kathy, once again. Our next webinar is going to be February 6th, and that is a membership webinar, so to attend, please become a member. Thank you, and have a great day.